Welcome to day one of the Corona Quarantine Chronicles, Frank Mir. You on FaceTime, me on FaceTime, probably only about, 5 miles apart, but communicating over the internet because I guess we're sheltering in place. Is that word? You're probably just happy to be back in the country.
I'm so happy.
All right, let's start there. Now, you have been in Ireland you were in Ireland for what was supposed to be a month. It's going to be a solid month, huh?
UK. The UK.
Oh, yeah, it wasn't just Ireland. That's true. The UK, you were going to...
UK was going to be my hub there with the Manchester top team. Carl Prince just opened up his gym there.
Yeah. Hang on. Froze up a second. I heard you. Carl Prince, what?
Yeah, the idea was that during the week I was going to be in Manchester, top team training there with Carl Prince.
Hey, by the way, Frank, just real quick before you say any more, if you can keep that phone right where it is, you're great. That's a good shot.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You were saying.
Yeah. So I had been in. The idea was to basically fly over to the UK, stay in Manchester during the week, and on the weekends travel to different places. Do seminars and hang out and see different people that I built relationships with. Like Azerbaijan and and whatnot. But as it was funny because Galen, just before I took off too, because our first stop was in Ireland at the Fight Con, and I remember specifically getting out of my truck. We were at Lifetime, and I was running. I just dropped Ronan off at school, and Galen's like, "Hey man, I don't know if you're paying attention, but this coronavirus thing, are you feeling comfortable leaving with you and Bella?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think it'll be fine." And originally, actually, Jennifer was supposed to meet me there with Ronan and Cage during the middle of my trip. Because, 30 days is a long time to be without, my boys and my wife. And so I was like, I'll be there for 10 days. You come out for 10 days, and then I'll stay for 10 more days with Bella,
Yeah.
And then as we got there, I told Jen, I'm like, hey, we both decided that, I don't know, this is starting to get a little kind of crazy. I don't feel comfortable, Ronan's small, 10 years old, which in hindsight now, they're actually the least susceptible to coronavirus.
He'd be the last mirror standing over there.
He actually was the most resilient. But I mean, I think just as a father, my first thing was, okay, the younger kids, less resilient maybe than my teenagers are,
Yeah.
And so then we canceled that aspect. And then after I got back from Slovenia, that's when it really started to hit the fan. Hold on a second. Hey, babe. That's when it started getting kind of scary as far as how the news was picking it up, and it was funny. At first, it was just like, hey, make sure you wash your hands. Hygiene is just treat it like the flu, which me, because of, years of MMA and martial arts, I've always had good hygiene because otherwise you're going to walk around with, ringworms.
You don't want to get staph, right? Yeah.
And in fact, actually something I do that's strange, which I want to explain this now because I know people look at me very weird when I do this sometimes in the restroom. So I got such weird looks this last trip because people are, I think, paying more attention to washing hands.
Yeah.
I wash my hands before I pee. Because my thought process is that my penis is much cleaner than my hands are.
Yeah, that makes...
My hands are touching me. So, and not that I don't wash my hands afterwards.
Right.
Before I adjust myself or touch my equipment, if I've been shaking hands and touching things, I don't understand why anybody wants to touch their penis with their hands. Your hands are the dirtiest thing on you.
You know what? I'm going to start doing that immediately. I think let's get this catching. Now's the time.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, somebody will name it after you. They'll just call that the mirror. I do the mirror. Yeah.
Yeah. So then once Trump announced about the European countries and the Schengen, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly because I've just been reading it, the 26 countries that basically allow very easily free travel between them, that they were going to be closed off from going to the U.S. At that moment, I had a trip to Germany, and Azerbaijan got canceled. The KSW that I was going to commentate on had been canceled, so there was no Poland trip now. So then at that moment, I hadn't planned on coming back until the end of March. But then I just started getting nervous as the days were going on that it was going to be, I'm reading that it's 5 to 10 hours to get through, through one of the 12 airports. And so, hold on a second. Hey, Jen, baby, we're taping. One of the 12 airports that, 5 to 10 hours. In fact, when we rebooked our ticket to come home, I only booked a ticket for me and Bella to get from London. We took the train down to London, and I found flights to go over there to JFK. I didn't even book a flight from JFK to Vegas because I didn't know how long it was going to take to get through customs. Passport control, I was seeing pictures of it. I kind of had a confident feeling that I saw the mayhem that happened the first 2 or 3 days, but I figured that, like with anything, when something new is instituted, that's just, working itself out.
Yeah.
I was hoping by the Wednesday that I came back that it wouldn't be that much of a problem. And sure enough, it wasn't. We filled out some paperwork on the plane, one sheet. Basically, have you been to China or, I think Italy and in the last 14 days? And then when we got off, have I been feeling the symptoms? I think it was like 3 questions, like have you been sick in the last 24 hours, or have you been exposed to anybody that you know is sick, or whatever they were. And then as soon as we got off the plane, there was 2 medical personnel. I think were probably the equivalent of paramedics. They weren't physicians by any stretch. And so they checked our temperature, asked us how I felt. Me and Bella obviously said we felt fine, and that was it. It took, honestly, it added maybe 15 minutes to our travel. And at that point, the airport, JFK, was so dead that, I used the electronic passport entry, and we walked right to the front, and, we're through instantly. Where, in fact, we had to wait for 15, 20 minutes for our luggage to even start coming down. And then at that moment, I felt a lot more confident. Then this morning we got home, and now I'm just jet lagged and much happier that as things go down, I'm here with my family.
Yep. Well, it's good to have you back. And I was talking to your Jennifer on text and making sure everybody was okay over there. And she was saying she was going to be very relieved when you got home, obviously. So, so it's nice to know all that's come together. Well, let me catch you up on what you've been missing out on.
Oh, man. Yeah, because actually I am worried about you, because I was sitting there thinking, like, when I was reading, I'm like, oh, they're shutting Vegas down, not essential for 30 days. I'm like, a lot of my friends have jobs that require, like yourself, your Jen, Sean Lane. There's people that I know that it's like, well, like Sean Lane, how do you shut a bar down for a month and still pay your bills? Yeah. So so now I get to talk to you.
Right. Well, obviously we were watching everything just grow exponentially day by day by day. And, I was, our mutual friend Hal Sparks, who lives part-time here in Vegas, he and I were together a couple of times. We actually this was going to be, speaking of canceled work, this was going to be like the biggest month that I had for stand-up in quite a while. I had my regular gigs at the Stratosphere, and then...
Yeah, from the 26th, didn't you?
Yeah, he and I were going to be doing a triple bill with Don Jameson, who metalheads will know as one of the hosts on that metal show from VH1. Yeah. We were going to, of course, he was on the podcast with us a couple of weeks ago. So we were going to do the 26th here, and then the next night in L.A. We had an L.A. gig booked since we had Don on the show. So I was, that whole week, I was working I think I only had 2 nights off for the whole week, and a lot was coming up. So anyway, Hal and I were together working on those shows and stuff, what would have been those shows. And, we were talking, and he's always ahead of this kind of, as far as just being in the, he stays informed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And he was like, man, this is going to get big. Like, this is all, they're gaming this thing out like at the CDC, and they're showing like, okay, if it's this today, it's going to be this in 72 hours, and it's going to be this a week from now. And so by the weekend, there was a lot of talk about, I mean, we didn't cancel the shows at that point, but we knew actually what we were, I was halfway kidding when I said this. Over this past weekend, I said maybe we should market these shows as guaranteed to draw less than 100 people, because at that point, or less than 500 or something like that, because at that point they were saying no gatherings bigger than 250, and that's honestly that's what a full comedy club would be. Like that's what the full club at the Stratosphere would be, something like that. So I was thinking, well, the smaller shows may be the ones that, can actually get a little more attention right about now. So we weren't thinking we were going to have to cancel the shows. However, at my other job at the Haunted Museum, word was starting to circulate. Like, what do we do? What is being considered? What are we watching for? And at that point the schools had not closed in Vegas yet, and that was one that we were kind of watching to see, and so over the weekend I think it was announced that the schools would close, and then the original plan at the museum was I worked on Sunday, so I was there, and by the way, it was not hurting business. I mean, we had a ton of people there Saturday and Sunday. I mean, lying around the building, it wasn't hurting business at all. And everyone was doing a great job of going above and beyond, to sanitize everything, wiping everything down, wiping down doorknobs, every 10 minutes or whatever, just to be abundantly cautious. But by Sunday, I guess it was. Yeah. Sunday, the decision was made because the schools had closed and you were just starting to see things close down. The decision was made to close the museum without announcing a date to reopen. Because, some people are announcing dates to reopen, but it's all arbitrary. I mean, you can say 2 weeks from now or, 30 days from now, but we'll see when we get there, right? So the decision was made on Sunday, and originally I think the plant we were going to open on Monday, and then that was going to be the last day. But by Monday morning, the decision was made to close entirely. And in fact, it wouldn't have been able to stay open anyway, even if they had wanted to, because by the next day the mayor had closed down all essential businesses. So that kind of gets you up to speed on how my work life was affected, how my stand-up gigs were affected. Of course, now, basically the same day, we realized we'll have to cancel the stand-up shows too, because the Stratosphere had originally planned to stay open. Even though, for people who don't know the way that the infrastructure, the ownership of Vegas casinos works, you have MGM and Caesars are basically the two big owners, right? So they had both made the decision to close their properties down, but the ownership group that owns the Stratosphere had said they were going to stay open. Well, their hand got forced. They may have wanted to stay open, but the mayor's edict shut them down. And then, so that closes, so my Jennifer, who is, of course, a hairstylist, that closes her business down. So basically, Monday, I guess, Monday and Tuesday were the drop dead dates for us, because that's where we found out. Basically, Frank, if you and I wanted to find out what it's like to become full-time podcasters, here we are. Because guess who else can't work? You. You can't work. So the one thing that you and I can keep doing that bears any semblance of a business model is this right here. Here we are.
I guess we're doing a lot of podcasts then.
Hey,
because we have been missing them.
All right. So listen, here's as good of a time as any, and then we'll get into some opinions about what we think about all this and everything. But here's as good of a time as any to talk about what you and I were talking about on text the last couple of days. And I feel like if we commit it to the airwaves here, then we'll make it happen. We have a Patreon page, patreon.com/phone booth fighting. up to now, we've kept it very minimal because we haven't put much content on there. There's a little bonus stuff on there, and it's only cost $1 to join, to $1 a month to. It's basically like tipping us if we were baristas at Starbucks to get a little extra stuff over there. But our plan is to do this on a daily basis. Why not? I mean, they may not be 90-minute shows, but, you know, we'll do 20, 30 minutes, something like that. The way I thought about it is you and I...
You afraid to come over to my house?
No. We're going to get together, too. We're going to get...
You're going to wait till 14 days?
Well, you know, we're gonna get together. It's not just going to be on FaceTime. But I'll put it this way. You and I couldn't, I mean, we can get together at each other's houses, but we can't do much more than that. It's not like we could go out and do a live show and invite people or anything like that.
Right.
So here's the plan. The plan is we will keep doing our weekly free show, but all this daily stuff we're going to push over to our Patreon page. So once again, that's patreon.com/phone booth fighting. And head on over there. By the time you hear this podcast, we'll have the apparatus up, and you can probably look at different levels to join. What I'm also thinking is, Frank, because we are sitting on, we got a bunch of phone booth fighting T-shirts, and we need to make some room for some new shirts, maybe later on in the fall when we all emerge from our cocoons. We'll put together some kind of package where if you join up, we'll include a T-shirt in that. I'll figure out how to do that when we get off the air. But anyway, just take a look. Go over there, patreon.com/phone booth fighting. That is how Frank and I are going to stay in business for at least as long as this thing lasts, because he can't fight and I can't talk or tell jokes or whatever other than just right here on this podcast. So we'll be
seminars, no commentary.
That's right. So we'll be talking more about that. I did have this idea though. Tell me what you would think about doing this on Patreon. So, and I'm putting you on the spot because I haven't pitched you this idea yet. I was thinking, since you and Bella were going to do your seminars over there, maybe periodically you and Bella could demonstrate a jiu-jitsu tip, and we could include that, you know. Something like that. So that way we'll figure out a way to involve the kids and all that sort of thing.
Sounds good.
Yeah. My Jennifer will come over and do your Jennifer's hair. Maybe she'll show hair. I don't know. We'll figure out some things to do. But yeah, so what I figure is we do this on a daily basis. You and I would be spending 20, 30 minutes talking about whatever the latest is anyway. We may as well do it. And then that way, we'll have a nice little time capsule to remember this whole thing. It's like keeping a daily diary. If one of us drops dead from it, the other one can continue in memoriam, you know, doing a broadcast. I don't know. We'll figure it all out. But anyway, we're going to commit to doing this on a daily basis. And you know what? When we emerge from it, we'll have a nice little premium Patreon page in place, and then we'll stay on top of that as well. We've been wanting to do that for the longest time anyway, so that'll be a good way to do it. Okay, more on that as the days go by. But tell me, Frank, what your just kind of overall thoughts are about where we find ourselves.
You know, I'm still just trying to figure it out, to be honest with you. Obviously, I'm looking at the amount of deaths there are and infected people and what's going on. And then I think, wow, man, are we overreacting to this a little bit just because of, you know, the flu, you know, has been around, you know, since forever. And you know, virus A, virus B, virus C, and you know, those are always claiming fatalities, and obviously people that have, you know, pre-existing conditions and, you know, the elderly. And so I didn't quite understand, you know, why this was grasping or, you know, hitting so hard. Mm-hmm. But at the other turn, you know, maybe it's because of the response that people have had to it as far as shutting down, you know, everything the way it is. Maybe that's why I'm not seeing the numbers. So it's almost kind of like, you know, kind of like basically saying, hey, we don't need it, you know, the polio vaccine is unnecessary. I'm like, well, no, that's because it works. That's why you get the perception that it's unnecessary. Yeah. If we didn't have it. So you know, I guess I'm battling back and forth between the two thoughts. It's like, you know, obviously seeing what happened in Italy, I'm like, all right, you know, that when it gets out of control or not paid attention to, it obviously can wreak havoc. But then balancing out, like, at the same time, almost all my friends and family rely upon, especially living here in Vegas, shutting down the economy for 30 days is also an issue. Obviously, being alive is the most important thing, but having your losing your businesses or having your bills pile up and get caught behind. Tax season's coming up right now. There are other issues on the table too that have to be addressed.
Here's a couple of overall thoughts I have about this. Number one, first world to third world is not nearly the jump the fall that we thought it was. That it is amazing how quickly we can be facing things that you just never. I mean, this is like the plot of a movie where Morgan Freeman is the president, and the country has, is being threatened and he's got to save the day. I mean, this is not real. This is not supposed to be real. And so what I would say is that's number one. And also the realization of how completely unprepared we were for this. Maybe overreaction or underreaction, that you find that out after the fact. You don't roll the dice and then go, oh, well, I guess that wasn't an overreaction. I guess we should have been concerned. So that's all fine. And if the worst thing that happens is we get through it and then we go, okay, well, it turned out it wasn't as bad as everybody thought. And, maybe in hindsight, we spent some money on it we might not have had to spend. Well, that's insurance. That's why you carry insurance. You don't have insurance because for a fact you're going to have a catastrophic illness. You carry insurance in case you do, right? But one thing that is for damn sure is that we are not prepared for this. And just the fact that anybody is having to cope with, we depleted the stock of the surplus stock of respirators and surgical masks, but we never replenished it. Or, the pandemic response unit was disbanded a couple of years ago and nobody noticed because it was just costing money. Yeah, it was. But now is when you need that sort of thing. So I hope we're never in that spot again. And let me tell you what I hope comes out of this. I hope, I don't know, you may be too young to, I'm almost too young to remember this, but my grandparents were kids in the Depression, right? So I remember my parents and, we would always talk about, because my grandparents were very frugal. Like, even they weren't rich, but they did pretty well for themselves. And they would still be very careful with money, saving money and that sort of thing, right? And whenever somebody would say, how come they're so cheap, my mom would always go, oh, they grew up in the Depression. And see, they know it got in their heads early because, people were starving, and that was back before Social Security and Medicaid and all that, right? I hope that's what happens with this and preparation. And by preparation, I don't mean toilet paper. I mean looking around and going, hey, if we have a catastrophic illness that happens in the course of weeks, not months, weeks, do we have we have enough respirators? Do we have a backup plan? Are we ready, basically? And I don't mean be a doomsday prepper, but just sit on a surplus of respirators that maybe we probably don't ever need, like the oil reserve. We have oil reserves. Why can't we have an abundance of respirator reserves, things like that? So what I'm hoping is, and I'll tell you, it will affect me in that way moving forward. I will not forget living through this, and I will always keep an eye on, hey, it's peacetime, but, it's like peacetime, wartime. It's peacetime, but do we have a defense? Okay, same thing. This is a war too. It's just against an invisible enemy. So that's number one. And then number two, my second overriding thought here is this. in the day and age of like the way you and I are talking on FaceTime, and by the way, I mean, we're doing this 5 miles apart, but we could have done this from, and we have before, different countries, right? We think about how everything is so cutting edge and everything's remote and technology rules the day and all that. All of a sudden, when this happened, I started making a list in my head of how many people do I know whose jobs aren't affected by this. And damned if I had a hard time coming up with like 3. I thought of my mom. She's an accountant. This is a good time to be an accountant. People aren't going to quit having taxes. But other than that, damn near everybody I know. It's like you said, And you can't fight. There's no people. There's no people to come to pay the money that it takes to watch you fight. So, I hope it made us realize, and different, Frank, than like, say, 2008, when Wall Street and the banks and all that were on the verge of collapse. You could, if you were a shitty person and an opportunist, and you were on the inside and in the know, and you're running, whatever, Lehman Brothers. I mean, you could get out ahead of it. You could go to the government for a bailout and all the rest of this. But right now, this puts everybody in the same boat. What do you think?
I'm curious why the toilet paper.
Yes. Okay. Well,
you have an answer for that? Because I keep seeing everybody makes jokes. My thought was this. Excuse me. I think it took one person to think, oh, I need a bunch of toilet paper. Which to me, having 200 rolls of toilet paper, unless you like wiping differently than somebody else, don't you shower?
Right.
You don't have 5 years worth of food to wipe your ass with.
No.
So that's my thought. It was like, you're going to run out of food before you run out of toilet paper. That's, I don't get why the hoarding of the toilet paper. What I thought was one guy grabbed a bunch for whatever reason, thought it was a good idea. And what most humans do, it's like a line. People like to get into a line because they sit there and go, oh, well, if they're all doing it, and it's a survival tactic. Everybody avoids the red berries. Well, maybe someone else ate a red berry and they died from it. I'll avoid it too. And so I think someone saw someone running with a bunch of toilet paper, and then a bunch of more people said, well, yeah, let's grab a bunch of toilet paper. And then before you know it, everybody was fighting for toilet paper.
Here's what I think that is. Yes, the monkey see, monkey do for sure. But the other thing I think plays into that is everybody just goes to what is the worst thing in my house to run out of. Like, the thing where you didn't know you were out of it until you needed it, and then you suddenly realize you're out of it. The only thing, toilet paper is probably number 1 on the list. And then the only time I ever think about I have that reaction if I suddenly realize we're out of toothpaste, right? But even that, okay, I need to go to the store. My mouth is just going to feel gross this morning until I get to the grocery store. I think it's just that. I understood the thought with the water, not in terms of needing to hoard it, but our water here in Vegas is not great. You can drink it. It's just not great. Now, we get our water delivered. We do bottled water. So I did think to myself, okay, got to make sure the delivery's showing up on, the right day on Tuesday, because if I go to the grocery store, I can't rely on going to the grocery store. Hey, the delivery doesn't come for another 2 days, so let me grab a couple of jugs of water. So it is not necessary. It's irrational. I think you're right. That's why people do it. But at the root of it, I think it's just base. I think it's just at the base of it all, what's the first thing that comes to mind, when I think of being stuck like this. Now, here's the bigger question. Eventually, the supply is not even eventually, probably very quickly. The supply will catch up, because you know who's having a party right now? The people at the toilet paper factory. But The question will be not will the shelves be restocked, but if this thing doesn't get fixed and right effing now, will people have the money to buy the products? And that's what's got to be fixed right now. And it's interesting, you see somebody like Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, who normally, cannot be bothered with the plight of peasants, out there saying, okay, not tomorrow, not the next day, right now. Fix this right now. Because he knows all of a sudden the country's on the verge of 20% unemployment. Like right there. That the fact that in just a period of weeks, something could happen that could, put the country on the verge of a depression if you don't fix it right now. That's the kind of ledge I think that we should never really allow ourselves to get to. I know there's no guarantees, and I know that, another 9/11 could happen, things like that. But see, even that though, Frank, 9/11 it devastated the airline industry and everybody was scared for security and things like that. But we knew what to do, and it didn't mean everybody couldn't go to work. That's insane. And it also didn't mean that everybody had to shelter in place. And that's where we're at right now, is like, having to stay in our homes. I mean, it's crazy. Like, we just did our grocery shopping online. I was just communicating with my shopper on the app, talking to them about like what we needed and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's nice that, and listen, let me say this too. And Jennifer and I have said this any number of times, and I'm sure you've had the same thought. For as crazy as all this is and as scary and all the rest of that, think about where you and I are in life compared to where some other people are in life.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who, I'll bet, when I say life was turned upside down the very first day, I don't even mean in terms of, I guess I can't go where I normally go or whatever. I mean, there's people who have to not know where their next meal is coming from.
Yeah.
And that is scary, scary, scary. By the way,
that's actually what I'm most terrified of right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually, I was talking to my father about and stuff about, I was probably going to drive up north to Washington where we have property and stuff and go camping. But the first thought that hit my head when I heard about the shutdown, I was like, there's going to be a lot of desperate people. I'm not leaving my house. I'm going to stick close to my firearms. And
and by the way, don't go to Washington. Don't go to Washington right now.
Well, not Seattle area. We were going to go to a little property out in the woods.
I know, but by the way, just as we're talking, California now has locked down their 40 million residents, so it is shelter in place for 40 million people in California. And you know what? Thanks, California. Thank you for doing that, because when you talk about the percentage of the population that's out there, man, this sucks, I know, but let's get all this straightened out, and we'll worry about what we can, the overreaction part of it, we'll worry about for later. But I won't feel foolish for any kind of erring on the side of caution, because what I have realized for sure is that we just do not have the level of preparedness that we need for this sort of thing.
Well, this is why I don't think it's an easy answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think governing people and making decisions like this, it has to be the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit there and always go with the mentality like, well, let's just be overly cautious. That's an easy answer, I think, that actually is too short-sighted. If we sat there and go, okay, everybody just, quarantine the house, shut everything down, I'm like, okay, but that's going to lead to other problems, such as, 20% unemployment. People are going to start rioting. People are going to go crazy. You get desperation. I have friends that run gyms and stuff, and they're still having to hang out at the gym and have someone there so people aren't breaking in and stealing equipment, because now people are going to run into problems. So, I don't think it's so simple as like, well, if we overreact, it's like, no, out of the two, overreacting is less than underreacting.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, but it's that precise amount that's really required. That obviously, people much smarter than me that are supposed to be in charge, hopefully can get this right, because everybody not working for 30 days or for however long and just being held up in their houses. People, you're not talking about, I can't just watch my football game, or basketball got canceled, or I'm not going to go to a concert. Now you're talking about like, oh shit, my kids are crying because they're hungry, or,
Yep.
or I need more medicine and I can't go buy it. What about what happens there?
Mm-hmm.
When all of a sudden people's survival gets put into question, their morality goes out the window, and rightfully so. I completely get that. I'm not in a situation where my survival is being put at risk right now, except for if my neighbor's survival gets put at risk. Now you're putting my survival at risk because they become desperate.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not saying, let's do this to the extent of like not being a free society. But what we're doing is, there's no martial law. Nobody's, the National Guard isn't driving up and down my street making sure I'm staying in the house. But what we are doing is going, hey, nobody be an asshole, okay? Like, if you can just hang it. Those people on the beach in Florida, all those spring break kids, they're acting like assholes. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. I told Jennifer earlier, I said, if they ought to come out there with a barrier on that beach and just start pushing all those kids into the water. Just like that. But no, seriously, it's like just do what you can do. And it also means, check on your neighbors. I got an old retired couple that just lives across the street from me. The woman to my left I think she's 80. So I'm checking on them. Sorry about that. Frank Mears' phone died there. Hey, by the way, 2 random questions about your phone. One, the picture that is your, how iPhones now, if you have a picture set, I can accept your picture and put it in the contacts.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
Okay. You look so, I looked at it and you look so thin in your face. For a second, I was like, why is Jennifer Meir hugging that strange man? And then that has to be like a weight cutting photo or something. I mean, it looks drastic.
I have to look.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to know if that's what that photo is from. And then the second thing, it is now very, very funny to call your phone, get your voicemail, and hear you say, I'll be in Uzbekistan Thursday through Sunday. Like, what a terrible time to plan a trip to Uzbekistan.
I got to change my voicemail. I'm not, you know what, though? I don't listen to voicemails.
Yeah.
I hardly ever clear them out. In fact, if it doesn't, I just now recently, since like the last couple months, I noticed that it'll transcribe it for me.
Yeah.
I might glance and read through it, but if you leave me a voicemail, I hope to God you don't need me to help you. If your life depends on me listening to that voicemail,
yep,
you're shit out of luck, dude.
Yep.
Especially if I sit there, I have like an attention span of about 10 seconds.
Uh-huh.
So if I see like a 27-second, I look at it, I'm like, oh, yeah, I just delete it. I don't even look at it half the time if I'm too clear.
Yeah, no, the iPhones make it easy to do that. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap this one more time. Check out patreon.com/phone booth fighting, because we're doing this again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So we're still doing the free weekly episode, as I said, through our regular channels, but we're going to put all our daily content for the most part on our Patreon page, and we'll make it very cheap for you to join us over there, because you know what? One thing is, Frank, you're hearing about it. People are looking for ways to amuse themselves. This is a good time to own Netflix stock or, that sort of thing. So we'll do our part and generate some daily content as well. So
because then tomorrow I'm going to tell you I have all the conspiracy theories that are flying around. I have one that I actually think you'll agree with me on.
That's a tease. All right, that's a tease for tomorrow's episode. The only way you're going to hear it is to get over there to our Patreon page and sign up, patreon.com/phone booth fighting. And hey, while we're plugging things, Frank, maybe more than ever before, the Amazon banner is a great way to help out Phone Booth Fighting. That's where you come in. So tell everybody how to go to phoneboothfighting.com and include us in their Amazon lifestyle these days.
Well, hell, if you need extra toilet paper and it ran out of the store, I guess you can get it on Amazon.
That's right.
Click on that banner. Any purchases you make, a small percentage comes back here to help us out at the show.
Go to phoneboothfighting.com and click on that Amazon banner, bookmark it, and then that benefits us, and we appreciate it. All right. For Frank Mir, fortunately, thankfully, back in the United States of America, and myself, Richard Hunter, and Porno Mikey out there, by the way, who we haven't had a chance to say this on the podcast, is a new father. His little girl, Peyton, was born healthy and happy, so congratulations to him. And I've been talking to him on text, so he can join us. We'll FaceTime him in as well for some of these daily shows. And he's taking the opportunity to do woodworking projects. He's like Sarah Winchester in his house. He's just building on to stuff left and right.
It's a time though to be at home.
Yeah, he's streaming some of it today. He was on Instagram and he basically live streamed him building an entire medicine cabinet from scratch. So there's reasons to go over there and check him out as well. Anyway, we'll talk to him about when we get it on. All right. I will talk to you tomorrow, buddy. We'll be taping another one of these. All right. Tell the family hello, and we'll talk to you tomorrow, okay? All right. Later.